Today, I've got a story to tell you about the golden era of longboarding, to inspire the people who didn't know, or to motivate others to see what they could be. An era where people were faster, rivalries existed, and seemingly superhuman demigods still roamed the earth. Hi, my name is Adam, and I'm the one telling you the story about the longboard marathons. I watched the unbeatable marathon record get set as a kid watching YouTube, and up until now, they still haven't been beaten. With these records in mind, I've come to this track year after year to see if I was ever finally good enough to do it, and I've been documenting what it takes. But before we get into any of that, first I have to tell you about what was behind those records in 2010 and 2011.
The Adrenalina Skateboard Marathon World Tour is coming to Puerto Rico. Register now at skateboardmarathon.com. Open to all ages. $30,000 prize purse.
Adrenaline Skateboard Marathon is finally arrived.
The event was the brainchild of Adrenalina, which had staged marathons in New York, Florida, Texas, and Puerto Rico.
So this extreme sports company called Adrenalina comes out while longboarding is at its peak in 2010 through 2012. James Kelly's throwing his board off a cliff, Paul Kent is skating across countries, and Adrenalina decides to set up a world tour for longboard push races. With prize purses over $30,000, they create a bubble where distance longboarding got mainstream sponsors. With all this hubbub, longboarding seemed like it was about to be the next big things. And budding stars were finding their identities and bringing the races to life to match. It's easy to underestimate how good these athletes really were. So let's start with Hallandale, where I can convince you.
This check says $10,000. That's right, $10,000. Matt, how'd you get here?
Adrenalina flew me here.
That's right, so not only was Adrenalina advertising a $30,000 prize purse for a sport in its infancy, they flew in Matt Elvers, the current marathon record holder at the time, from the UK, all the way to Hallandale.
Who do you think is going to be at the front of the pack with you today?
Paul Kent, without a doubt.
Of course, Paul. Paul is probably someone you know. I think he's the most famous distance skater. And right before this race, he finished skating across the Andes, so of course you had to be a superhuman essentially to beat him. At least that's what most people thought. He was even filming a series training to win this marathon, so the pressure was on him.
Hello, my name is Paul Kent. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be preparing for one of the largest races of my life. I've got my endurance to the point where I can skate all day, and it's really not a problem. But now I need to skate all day incredibly fast. So,
Paul, the Pascaboo kid, told me he trained somewhere around 30 hours a week, not including weights. Physiology and optimization are very much Paul's specialty, which he translated to his skating, and that's what he does now as a physio. So, for Paul, the marathon was kind of his to lose.
I think there's going to be some random unknown guys that just shoot to the front and might take it. It's going to be crazy.
Matt Elvers also mentions the New York crowd, which includes the king of Broadway bomb, kind of the Michael Jordan of outlaw races, Kiefer Dixon. And the first race kind of goes, at least begins as people expect, with Paul Kent in the lead and Matt Elvers behind. Right behind Paul, unsurprisingly, is Kiefer Dixon, but in front of Kiefer Dixon and between them is an unknown man from Indiana. As Matt Elvers predicted, a nobody in the longboarding world at the time came out and upset the field, taking home the first ever Adrenalina marathon and the marathon record with it.
You killed it! Woo! Killed it, dog! This is Jeff Vyain, just won the Adrenalina Skateboard Marathon. Jeff, what'd you just do, bro? I fucking set a record and I won $10,000!
I remember following Paul's to the wall and being like, who's this guy who just beat Paul, who was supposed to win? And that's Jeff Vyain, the Wiggler, because he could pump at 18 miles per hour.
Why do you think you won?
Because I'm the fastest.
Yeah, I think so.
I came from a cross-country and track background. I've been through it a million times before.
yeah. Out there, it wasn't going too fast. The guys went up, they started going on me.
So for Paul, Kiefer, the other guys who were expected to win, This guy Jeff Vyain came out of nowhere, and it became immediately apparent that when money's on the line, things are going to get tougher. A rivalry was born. Interestingly enough, Jeff had been plagued by injury as a runner, and he was peaking in longboarding. That being said, he was still a 4-minute miler freshman year of college before his injuries, and a 350 1500 meter runner. When you talk to Jeff and Paul, they'll both admit that Jeff is the more talented one with ridiculous acceleration and crazy fast pumping, but Paul is, still obviously talented, but he was the one who trained harder, and I think at his peak, maybe he was just a little bit faster than Jeff. Well, the rider's more important than the setup. The setup really epitomizes the way a rider rides. So let's talk about Jeff's Hallandale 2010 setup, which was a subsonic pulse top-mount pumper, meaning it's a high-up thing with really twitchy trucks and really grippy, large, soft wheels, so you can pump efficiently. The stiff flex, height, and twitchiness made this a 10 out of 10 board for pumping, while those same attributes made it an inefficient reach for pushing, while that extra room for pushing from the height meant he could take advantage of very powerful sprints. So this is where Jeff got his nickname the Wiggler, from how well he could pump. Paul's setup was almost the exact opposite of that. The Rain Longtrex D-Light Demon Seed that he used the ride across South America and Morocco. It's super low and super lightweight, thanks to its bamboo and fiberglass foam core construction. Since Paul's from the school of pushing, he ran stable trucks unlike Jeff, and he ran a little bit smaller lightweight wheels to help his push efficiency. Lightweight and then also being low were two of the tenets of Paul's setup, which was really just trying to be as efficient as possible throwing that board. But that meant that your push power was lower since you didn't have a lot of space to work with being so low and the deck was so stiff, not a lot of flex. That also means that the pumping efficiency with, more stable trucks wasn't exactly there since you need twitchy trucks that really start pulling yourself. Next up was Adrenalina at Governor's Island, where Jeff was going to see if he could repeat his victory once again. Adrenalina at New York City was intense. People realized the money was real, the word was out, and anyone who thought they had a chance was going to be there. Even though people came out of the woodworks, Paul, Kiefer, and Jeff would show it was more than a fluke, that they were known for a reason.
Paul Kent and Jeff Vyain! Here they are, the leaders!
Governor's Island was not an ideal course. You had to do multiple laps, pass everyone who was slower than you. But Jeff Vyain and Paul ended up drafting each other, and Jeff ended up coming in for the win right around 132, proving that it wasn't a fluke that they were fast.
We are live with the Adrenalina Marathon Champion, Jeff Vyain! What did you just do, brother?
I just won a lot of money.
I asked him now.
Oh my gosh.
There we go. That's some good sportsmanship. He's falling all over. You guys, that was incredible competition. It was so tight most of the race. What happened just there at the end? You get a little winded?
Nah, I wasn't winded. My muscles weren't sore. I just felt really hot.
Really? Jeff, how'd you feel when you started pulling away?
I mean, I couldn't believe it. I really thought that he was playing mind games with me.
Maybe part of the reason Jeff got so much faster was his new upgraded setup, his subsonic prototype with a zero rear. He set it up with surf rods and then eventually Ronins, and his custom Jeff Vyain Wiggler wheels. This lower height meant it was a lot more efficient to push, and he could still pump it. It was a jack-of-all-trades setup. Paul might not have won, but he'd finally figured out his mental game. And Jeff would use the money from his winnings to start Pantheon longboards, and something he's always wanted, an orchestral gong. Anyway, this jump from 15-17 miles per hour was exponential. It made it so you couldn't just be a good athlete, you couldn't just do a 4-minute mile. You had to be able to do a 4-minute mile, and also balance on one leg with maxed out heart rate going over potholes on a longboard. It was godlike. Next in the season was Broadway Bomb. Broadway Bomb is the largest race probably, but it's an outlaw race. It's illegal, and it's down the streets of Broadway, New York City, the realm of Kiefer Dixon. As the king of New York City, Kiefer won a decade of Broadway Bombs consecutively. Yet, I still think he was underrated. Kiefer is a genius in the way that he's just so good at sprinting, and his setups were unconventional, not the normal thing people were riding at the day. Flexi pintail, big wheels, narrow trucks. But I think he was a genius in the way that he did his own thing, because that's a great setup for sprinting now that we know more. And in the marathon, he was competitive, but really he was an 8 to 10 mile sprinter, yet he was still racing with the best. Despite Paul and Jeff winning more Adrenalinas at the end of it, Kiefer always won Broadway Bomb. Paul and Jeff never even got close, which speaks to how fast he was.
You're watching the 2011 Broadway Bomb. We are here at the finish line in the financial district of New York City. Here they come. With a best time of 29 minutes and 6 seconds, Kiefer Dixon crosses the line first. A local boy from the Bronx, he has won more push races in the Northeast than anyone else this year.
And one more from 2011, the Central Park race, which is 6.1 miles around Central Park. And Kiefer dominates this one, racing against Jeff, who trained here while he worked at Bustin.
He was beasting at the end. He just cranked by me.
Really?
Yeah, dude's got
Just try to finish strong.
So yeah, I just don't want you to forget that Kiefer Dixon skated 17.7 miles per hour around a hilly loop in baggy cargo shorts. That's insane. So if anybody was going to beat Paul and Jeff, it was Kiefer. Which brings us to Puerto Rico for the third Adrenalina Marathon. Puerto Rico wasn't ideal, obviously the rain, but if you watch this footage, Jeff and Paul slowly get dropped, and you can watch Kiefer accelerate and see the speed that his board moves forward with every push. And since this course was a loop with a lot of sharp turns and hills, I think this perfectly suited Kiefer, who is a guy with explosive acceleration. And I think that's something that's really cool about longboard racing in general. You have these powerful, fast accelerating guys like Kiefer who do well on turny technical courses, races through cities. Then you look at Paul, this economical, efficient, smooth guy who could go for days. Then you guys like Jeff, who they don't only push, they also pump. There's so many different techniques and setups that make it such an interesting, different race. I think everyone who really loves longboarding also loves longboards. And the fact that people can compete on such different setups with such different techniques is just so interesting. Kiefer really rolled with this course, taking it to his advantage, his strengths, a lot like his board. So let's talk about his setup. Kiefer made a custom fiberglass pintail that he would ride with buzzed trucks or narrow randals, something wedged. And he'd ride big flywheels or bigger flywheels for training. You can't really pump this sort of setup with the big wheels and noodly deck. But the push efficiency is actually a lot higher than you'd think, because it's so flexy it sags fairly low. And Kiefer can use all that range of the height and that flex to generate extremely powerful and fast pushes. So now that I've talked about all the setups, let me just quickly mention, you had Jeff's setup from the first race, pure pumper. Then you had Jeff's second setup, the all-arounder. Then you have Paul's setup, the super efficient setup. And you also have Kiefer's setup, the pure push power setup. And it's pretty amazing to think that these are all boards that won the same race within a pretty similar margin. Plano, Texas, the penultimate marathon before the last race of the year. At this point in time, the most competitive racers were all in tights. They were all aerodynamic, drafting mattered. It had gotten really serious, and you could see that especially in Plano.
Having Jeff on my sights the whole time on the horizon, man. Every time I felt slow, I knew that he was going fast, so I just had to, he just pushed me in the wind, like mentally.
If you talk to Paul, I think he thinks Plano might have been one of his best performances. Possibly under a 1:30 marathon, but they messed up the course distance and had to do an extra lap, making it possibly a 28-ish mile race. All the pressure, all the training, and he had finally done it.
Oh man, I don't know, I crossed the finish line, I fell down, started almost crying. I had like cramps in the first 5 minutes, I thought I was done.
I could tell when I was riding with him that I was not going to be able to keep up with him.
Well, it sounds like I'm emphasizing the money when I mention these prize purses. The reality behind it is, I find it so interesting because this was the only time people were making a living off of push racing.
What they're doing here is so cool. They're allowing us to basically, skate for a living, or as close to it as possible, which is just, an awesome opportunity for us.
It's just a really interesting story that the guys who had always been longboarding, sacrificing 20, 30 hours a week of training with no payoff, were the ones who were still winning these giant prize purse races. That's what I love about longboarding. People do what they do because they love it, not for the money.
This really isn't my win. It's all the people that were motivating me, that were driving me to the hills, like what people that watched my daughter when I'm out training, sending me love over the internet, learning how to type right now to learn how to spell. This is everybody else.
And we are back. Hallandale 2011. People didn't know it at the time, but Adrenalina was too good to be true. Luckily, this race was a proper send-off with all the major riders, with Paul, Jeff, Kiefer, and a lot of other guys too. Maybe that they rented a helicopter to film the race might have been a sign that, I don't know, the finances weren't going to work out forever. But either way, it gave some good race footage for this video.
Served ourselves a little bit. We decided to keep together as a group.
The beginning was really tough. We were trying to separate ourselves from the pack.
Hallandale was very competitive in the way that they also had Jason Yerke with them, and everyone was doing some drafting. Hallandale is also just a great course because it's a flat course. So this was a great time to set a record. Who knew that this would be the last record? I mean, Adrenalina wasn't really coming back. It'd come back to San Diego later, but that wasn't quite the same as this whole tour.
Coming in towards the end, how was that? Like right here, like right as we're coming into Gulfstream. And then he passed me in Gulfstream, and I passed him.
And came in really, really hard together.
Paul and Jeff crossed hand in hand with a new record, and they decided to share the win.
I crossed the line. I've never sprinted that hard at a finish line in my life.
So there you go. Now you know about Adrenalina. This was push racing at its best. The rivalries, the friendships, the higher stakes, and the faster records. It may be sad it's gone, but it stands in time to show us we can be better as athletes and as a sport as a whole. So for part 2, I want to show you that this record, you can beat it. Yeah, probably you want to beat 130, honestly, the show, with the new technology and science and help from some old friends who used to do Adrenalina, that it's possible to beat these demigods, even as a mere mortal.